Jessica and Albert had been living together for a long time, but they had only recently gotten married. They met while studying at university and had been together ever since. However, they were tired of the exhausting city life and wanted to move to a quieter and bigger house. Albert finally found the house they had been dreaming of for so long. There was a house being sold at an incredibly low price in a small town outside the city. When Albert found it, he already knew Jessica would love it. This old but spacious house, hidden deep in the forest and far from the city, was an opportunity they couldn't pass up due to its low price. Albert called the real estate agent and arranged a meeting. On the first Saturday, they went to see the house together. As they approached the location, a smile had already appeared on Jessica's face. "Look at this, Albert. It has a huge garden, and there's even a forest right next to it. That's practically ours, too. Maybe we can even go camping, just like the old days. You must miss it as well, right?" Seeing Jessica's excitement, Albert felt even more drawn to the house. When they entered, the elderly real estate agent showed them around. The study, the bedroom, everything was still furnished. Albert asked the old agent, "Are these furnishings staying with the house? Won't the previous owners want them back?" The elderly agent, Richards, shook his head. "I don't think so. These things have been here for a long time, no one will come to claim them, I can assure you. Look, there's another room here. It would make a great hobby room. Come on, follow me." By the end of the tour, Albert and Jessica had decided to buy the house. It was a bit old and needed maintenance, there were signs of mold in some places, but Albert kept reassuring Jessica that this place was a hidden gem. Since they bought it for such a low price, spending a little on repairs wouldn't be a loss. A week later, on a Sunday, they had already moved in. The house was filled with boxes. Jessica couldn't help but wonder how they had managed to fill such a large space so quickly. "Even these old furniture pieces take up a lot of space," she muttered to herself. At first, everything seemed normal. They painted some walls, arranged their belongings, and threw away some of the old furniture left by the previous owners. Albert worked in the city while Jessica wrote from home. However, over time, strange things began happening in the house. Odd noises at night, objects mysteriously changing places, and dark mold patches on the walls kept growing, especially in the study. At first, Jessica thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. One evening, while working on her writing, she heard a faint sound from the attic. Since Albert wasn't home, she had no intention of going upstairs alone to check. However, the noises didn't stop. She was certain something was moving up there. She hesitated for a moment but then decided to open the attic ladder and climb up. With a small flashlight in hand, she scanned the room. Dusty boxes, old furniture, and cobwebs filled the space. She reached up to turn on the light, but the bulb didn't work. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed a vague silhouette in the dim light. Her breath caught in her throat. She was about to scream when, suddenly, the bulb flickered on. Nothing was there, but something was different. A dusty photo frame sat on one of the shelves. Summoning all her courage, she reached for it. The photograph seemed very old. It depicted 5 people, 3 adults and 2 children, but their faces were indistinct, strangely blurred. That night, when Albert returned, Jessica told him everything. At first, he laughed and dismissed it as her imagination. A dusty photo frame sat on one of the shelves. Summoning all her courage, she reached for it. The photograph seemed very old. It depicted 5 people, 3 adults and 2 children, but their faces were indistinct, strangely blurred. That night, when Albert returned, Jessica told him everything. At first, he laughed and dismissed it as her imagination. But then Jessica showed him the photo. Albert examined it closely and realized that the house in the background was their house. Things were starting to get serious. The next day, Albert had to go down to the basement to check the fuse box, as there were electrical issues in the house. However, the basement was dark and damp. As the musty smell filled his nose, he felt something rustle beneath his feet. Looking down, he found an old newspaper clipping. The yellowed paper contained a disturbing headline, "Another mysterious disappearance in the forest." In 1957, a family of 5 living in this house vanished without a trace. Authorities found no signs of struggle, but neighbors reported hearing eerie whispers at night. Albert felt a chill run down his spine. These must have been the same people from the photograph Jessica had found in the attic. Panicking, he rushed upstairs to find Jessica, and they decided to confront the real estate agent. At the real estate office, they met Mr. Richards, the elderly agent. At first, he evaded their questions, but when he saw the newspaper and the photo, his face turned pale. Avoiding their gaze, he finally spoke. "I wasn't supposed to tell you this. But, yes, many people have disappeared in that house over the years. Some vanished without a trace, while others lost their minds and were institutionalized. I was forbidden from mentioning this when selling the house. Please be careful." Albert and Jessica were in shock. Jessica thought about the silhouette she had seen in the attic. Maybe that entity wasn't evil. Maybe it was trying to tell them something, trying to warn them. But there was something else in that house, and it wasn't friendly. They decided to move in with Jessica's mother, who lived in the city, until they could find a new place. When they returned home, Albert hurried to the bedroom to pack some clothes, while Jessica went to her study to grab her laptop. As she approached the bookshelf behind her desk, she thought she saw something move. Her hair stood on end. But it was so brief, almost like a trick of the light. Just books neatly arranged, nothing more. Then it happened again. Something shifted behind a book, as if a small gap had opened and closed. With trembling hands, Jessica reached out. Just as she was about to pick up the book, it fell to the floor. Behind the shelf, there was a dark hollow space. And inside it, 2 glowing red eyes stared back at her. The thing watching her had been hiding there all along. A hand shot out from the gap, grabbing Jessica by the shoulder. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Hearing her scream, Albert rushed out of the bedroom and ran to the study. But Jessica was gone. The laptop still sat on the desk. He felt like he was losing his mind. She had been here just moments ago. He had heard her scream from this very room. Where could she have gone? Frantic, he ran to the staircase, calling her name throughout the house. No response. Panic surged through him as he rushed back into the study. His eyes darted to the bookshelf. One of the shelves looked darker than the others. Something was off. He grabbed the bookshelf and yanked it aside. Behind it was a massive patch of blackness. The same mold that had been spreading throughout the house. It looked like the mold had peeled away, only to start closing again. Without hesitation, Albert reached inside, tearing at the mold with his hands. All he wanted was to find his wife. He didn't care about what was happening or what he was facing. His only thought was saving Jessica. After opening a small gap, he threw himself forward and fell inside. It was pitch black. "Jess," he shouted, a faint voice echoed from deep within. "I'm here," Albert whispered to himself. "I'm coming." Taking out his phone, he turned on the flashlight. He was standing in a long corridor. The walls were covered in mold. The air was thick with a disgusting, suffocating smell. He knew Jessica was here, but finding her wouldn't be easy.
Ignoring the smell, he continued walking down the corridor. As he moved forward, he noticed what looked like alcove-like doors in the walls. He reached out to peer inside one of them, but it was too dark. He pointed his phone's flashlight into the darkness. From deep within, he saw a faint figure staring at him. It was a woman, pale-skinned, with long black hair and a long white dress, tattered and dirty. Albert's voice trembled as he said, "Hello," but there was no expectation of a response. It was the kind of greeting born from despair. The woman tilted her head to the side and took a slow step toward him. The movement sent a chill through Albert's spine. He backed away from the door. As he continued walking down the corridor, he suddenly noticed that dates were etched beside the doors: 1878, 1890, 1895. There were so many doors, so many years, but among them one date caught his attention: 1957. That was the year the family in the newspaper clipping had gone missing. Albert's urgency gave way to fear. His body was shaking and his hands felt ice cold. Will we end up like them? He thought. He turned around to look at the hole he had crawled through at the beginning of the corridor, but the mold had already sealed it shut. "Jess," he called out. A response came immediately. "I'm here, Albert," Jessica shouted. He rushed toward the sound, but heard a crackling noise behind him. It was the same crunching sound the mold made when stepped on. Albert turned around. The woman from before had stepped closer, now at the doorway, watching him. At that moment, he felt a breath on his neck. He jerked around and froze. Standing before him was the man from the newspaper clipping. He was older now, with graying but still partially black facial hair. He looked like a normal man, except for his wide-open eyes staring intensely at Albert. In a faint voice, the old man said, "Leave this place." "My wife," Albert said. "I can't leave without her." "It's too late," the man replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "She's already waiting for you." "Who's waiting for me?" Albert asked, but before he could get an answer, Jessica's scream echoed through the corridor. Albert ignored the old man and sprinted forward, passing doors rapidly while glancing at the dates. Then he saw an alcove with the year 2025 beside it, the last one in the corridor. She must be here, he thought. But he hesitated, remembering the old man's warning. She's already waiting for you. What if it was a trap? His body was paralyzed with fear. He raised his arm like a wooden plank and shined his light inside. At the last moment, he saw movement. "Jess!" he called out. No response. Gathering his courage, he stepped inside. "Jess!" he called again. This time, he heard a reply. "I'm here." Albert followed the voice. His flashlight illuminated a motionless Jessica lying on the ground. "Jess!" he cried out, rushing toward her. Just as he took a step, another voice, identical to Jessica's, called from behind him. "I'm right here, darling." Albert froze. Fear gripped his body like a vice. He couldn't turn around. He didn't want to. A tight grip locked onto his leg. Looking down, he saw a massive mold-covered hand with long fingers and sharp nails squeezing his calf. Before he could react, the hand yanked him backward. Albert lost his balance, and the last thing he saw was the mold-covered floor rushing toward his face. Albert struggled to open his eyes. The light was too bright, burning his vision. His head throbbed with pain, and his leg itched terribly. But he was lying somewhere soft. This wasn't the mold-ridden corridor. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was in his bedroom. He had just woken up. Confused, he muttered, "Jessica," and quickly tried to get out of bed. As he stood, dizziness overtook him. The impact on his head was still affecting him. He figured his head would recover soon, but the itching in his leg was driving him insane. He scratched at it through his pajama pants, but it wouldn't stop. Pulling up his pajama leg, he gasped. His heart pounded. His neck burned with heat. The mold was on his leg now, a patch of black mold right above his ankle. It looked dry, like the mold on the walls, but it itched fiercely. He scratched harder, and to his horror, the mold peeled away along with his skin. It didn't hurt too much, but he knew if he continued, it could get infected. He rushed to the ensuite bathroom, rinsed his wound, and wrapped it with bandages from the medicine cabinet. Looking in the mirror, he noticed a swollen bruise on his forehead. A noise came from downstairs. Someone was in the house. He stepped out of the bedroom, cautiously moving toward the stairs. "Jessica!" he called out. Was it her? Descending the stairs, his heart pounded. If it weren't for the mold on his leg and the bruise on his forehead, he would have thought everything was just a dream. The sounds were coming from the kitchen. Slowly he approached the doorway and turned the corner. His jaw dropped. Jessica was there, standing at the counter with her back turned, seemingly busy with something. "Jess?" Albert called. No response. He hurried to her side and placed a hand on her shoulder. Jessica flinched violently, then turned to him. "Albert," she scolded, "you scared me." She removed an earbud from her ear. "I was listening to music. I didn't hear you." Albert's mind reeled. "Are you okay, Jess?" "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" she replied, puzzled. "You don't remember? The moldy corridor. You were unconscious." Jessica laughed. "What are you talking about, Albert?" Albert froze. She remembered nothing. "Come on, sit down," she said. "I just made breakfast. Grab the juice from the fridge." He sighed, realizing that talking wouldn't help. "Okay, I'll go get my phone first," he said, and hurried upstairs. In his study, the bookshelf was still there, but the mold on the walls had significantly faded. He pulled the bookshelf aside. The wall behind it was normal. The moldy hole he had crawled through the night before was gone. He returned downstairs. Jessica was already seated at the table, eating. He sat across from her. "Do you remember talking to the realtor about moving?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but I've changed my mind. I really like this house now." Albert's stomach twisted. He didn't believe for a second that she was okay. Sure, his forehead was bruised, but Jessica's mind was in a much worse state. He had to figure out what was happening. But where could he even begin? Then he remembered Mr. Richards and his warnings about the house's previous owners. Some of them went mad and were institutionalized, he had said. Maybe if Albert could get names from Richards, he could visit them in the hospital. Maybe, just maybe, they held the key to understanding what was happening here.